Strength through will is how we can reverse the perversion of values that have been instilled in you, in me, and all our brethren, insidiously through generations of ancestral oppression. Though it stood with as much superhuman endurance as anyone could, it left a deep impression. Invisible scars that have caused us to devolve into a state of unconsciousness so malignant, we've nearly forgotten we're not a problem to be solved. We always been the solution they seek to dissolve, with the illusion of ties that bind us to a system that blinds, of most vicious design, which is to free no man. Only together, through sharing of wisdom, can we heal the wounds of division, forever sealing that evil incision, and finally deprogram.
All right, here we go. Welcome to the Deprogram show. I'm your host, R.M.J.R. We got a special guest in the building. Brother go from way back, many well-traveled guy, very accomplished guy, Mr. Kamau Sankofa. What's going on, my brother?
All right, what's going on with you, my brother? I appreciate you for having me on your show. I like your show, and I'm impressed by the work that you're doing.
Man, I appreciate it, man. I appreciate you for being on, man. First thing I want to talk to you about, is Kamau Sankofa your birth name, or how did the name develop?
No, my birth name was Kelsey Kendrick, and I'm from Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Okay.
And I actually changed my name while incarcerated. I was doing a bid in federal prison, 15 years. Originally 16 years and 3 months, and then got back in court as a result of a Supreme Court ruling. And it was 15 years. And I say within the first, after some time of doing some reading, spending time in a number of think tank like groups in prison, with old heads from anywhere from East Coast to the South. Well, not just old heads. I was at FCI Memphis.
Okay.
And I was introduced to a book where let me back up.
Okay.
The very first book that I read was Make Me Wanna Holler by Nathan McCall. I don't know if you heard of that book. But the book was written in 1991, and it was a brother who actually grew up in the 50s and 60s in Newport News, Virginia. And shortly after he graduated from high school, he ended up catching up on a robbery case and did some time in prison. And he kind of like detailed his experience from the time he, went through the gate to the books he read, discussion groups, and the different characters that he met, and not characters in the cartoon sense, but just different individuals that he met and came across in his travels, and the different belief systems that he come across as far as religious, philosophical, and ideological belief systems in his studies. So that kind of led me on the track to reading and studying. And when I made it to FCI Memphis, I used to attend the Nation of Islam on a regular basis. The very first book, like I said, I read, Make Me Wanna Holler. I say the second book probably was Message to the Black Man in America by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And then Haki Madabudi wrote this book called Black Men, Obsolete, Single, and Dangerous, African-American Families in Transition. And he talked about everything, every life touch point for a Black male, growing up in this society. And he talked heavily about culture and names. And I can recall what really got me to consider thinking about changing my name was when I was attending this think tank group that was facilitated by a counselor, and the counselor had changed his name a counselor who actually worked at the prison, attended the Million Man March in '95 and changed his name. This was like between '96 and '99. And he showed this movie called Sankofa and by Halle Germer. And the movie come out in like '89. And that movie, along with my reading and studying, and come across, Book of Names, I end up deciding to change my name. I actually changed it later, like legally.
Okay.
So, but the original pronunciation and spelling was K-A-M-A-A-U, K-A-M-A-A-U, but I dropped the A in an attempt, or what I considered at the time was redefining myself, as part of an act of self-determination, rather. Because at that time, I was also introduced to Kwanzaa, never heard of it growing up in our time in Chattanooga, So that's how I eventually took on the name.
So what does the name, I mean, I know because I looked it up. So what does, tell the people, what does the name mean? Because honestly, before you say this, when I looked up the name just by seeing your page, I was like, it really fit him. So,
appreciate that.
Yeah, so tell the people what the name means.
Kamau, or Kamau, that's what the original pronunciation means quiet warrior or silent warrior. And Sankofa means the concept of it is to go back and reclaim or fetch what you lost in order to move forward for the future. So, that fit my life at the time, and, I actually started writing for the Chattanooga News Chronicle newspaper. It was then called the Chattanooga Courier. Back in '98. That was about my 4th year in at the time.
Okay, let me do something before you get too deep. All right, check this out.
Yeah.
So I noticed you caught a conspiracy charge. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I talked to Bigfoot about the charge conspiracy, and he mentioned that, correct me if I'm wrong, but he did mention that they came up with the conspiracy charge basically for the mafia.
That's correct.
And he was also saying that, well, I'm gonna say this, that's what he said that they came up with it for. But and I was telling him about a guy who just got out, my homeboy Gerald Tony, we call him OG. He just got out actually March 9th. And he went in on a conspiracy charge. And I was telling him how basically they don't have to have any, pretty much little to no evidence really against you to present a conspiracy charge. So if you want to go into it, tell the people how you feel, being that you actually caught a conspiracy charge. How do you feel about the conspiracy?
Well, like Bigfoot said, that it was targeted, for the mafia. But I know that Nixon came out with the war on drugs in 1970. And then, from the 1970s throughout coming into the war on drugs in the 80s, the conspiracy was targeted. Well, let me back up. Even in the 1970s, they began targeting marijuana, heroin charges and conspiracies, but they began targeted at the Black community. They also began targeting a lot of Black political organizations, trumping up conspiracies on a lot of Black political organizations. So I think the conspiracy served had one main objective, but coming from 2 different angles, as far as going for the political reasons, in order to prevent progress of blacks and oppressed people here in the country, as well as targeting the I would say, I would call our generation, or coming up through the 80s, the war on drugs, I would call that part of the conspiracy program geared toward the results, targeting the results of what they destroyed back then, to keep from that, keeping from, keeping from our generation from, developing and evolving into another force during our time.
Okay, so
but I would also say that it also served the purpose, of course, to blow up the prison system, for the feed the prison industrial complex.
and you mean by feed it, like you mean like when you say blow it up, you mean fill up the prison?
Yes, fill up the prisons.
Okay.
Yeah, because there was a war on our communities. Just a lot of our rights were violated, during a lot of the community's rights were violated within that time period.
So not to harper on it, did they actually, because I know of a case, I ain't gonna say his name out of respect, because
yeah,
I know of a case where it was like one of the biggest drug cases in our city in Chattanooga. They didn't even actually catch them with no physical drugs, but they hit them with conspiracy, and a couple of them guys, I know one got a life sentence. So did they do y'all kind of like I was telling how they did my friend, where they didn't really have physical evidence? It was just more so, I guess, hearsay, or like phone taps where they couldn't really just say how they, how they would say, okay, we believe it's this, so we gonna run with this.
Yeah, of course. Because conspiracy is like a catch-all that, with little or no evidence, little or no police work, prosecutor work, they can, with the phone tap, like for us, our situation was based on, the foundation it was phone taps. And it was actually, the warrants for the phone taps was for actually another crime, alleged crime that happened, in which a white man was killed in East Ridge. And I learned a lot of facts about this years later when I filed a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit against the Executive Office of U.S. Attorneys and the headquarters of FBI in D.C. It took me 5 years to get like 3 sets of like 800-page documents, but that's what they used to target us. They claimed that a vehicle was, or something related to the incident, was parked over, in Carousel, which was the block that we, hung out. And they used that as a reason to get wiretaps. So, and from that, it was like 920 hours of phone taps, and put together a conspiracy. And they had little or no drugs, so.
Yeah, so, cause like, I don't know, that's crazy. So, you said they gave you 16 years originally, right?
Yeah.
So, let me ask you this, because you said you wrote for the Chattanooga Courier while you was incarcerated.
Mm-hmm.
How did that come about? Because I like I said, I read about it, and because one thing, I try to do my research on people I'm interviewing.
Yeah.
So like, okay, And one thing I have to ask you, how did that come about? Being that you was incarcerated, how was you able to write for the Courier?
All right, and to give you the backstory from that, when I started doing lots of reading and just chopping it up with brothers from all over, and it was actually a reporter in Memphis. I was at FCI Memphis. A reporter came in and taught a journalism class, crash course, and brothers from everywhere took the class. And actually, the name of the column was Distant Voices, and so they, we had a project to come up with a prison newsletter. So came up with a newsletter, and I think around the same time, like around 97, my grandfather had passed away, and my grandfather was a teacher here in Chattanooga for like 30-something years, taught at Riverside, Hardy, how well-known, musician. So they had a Chattanooga Chronicle and a Chattanooga Times had a big write-up on my grandfather. So when I read it, and after like doing lots of reading, chopping it up with brothers, building, and I said, man, I wanted to like change my legacy from running the streets, hustling, selling drugs, and everything else I was doing at the time in the street. So I said, I want to change my legacy. So I end up writing the paper. I wrote the publisher on the paper, and I told him that I'd like to contribute. So I thanked them for the article that they did on my grandfather, and I wrote him, sent a long letter, saying that I'm interested in writing some articles that geared toward brothers and sisters that's still out in the streets, because I said that is people like myself and others in prison that was the best, who had a potential to reach brothers and sisters out there in the street. So I didn't hear back for a while, and I end up calling. I end up putting the number on my phone list and calling the paper, called directly to the newspaper, and he said, talk to him, and he said, well, send me what you got whenever you get it. So I think I worked on it for about 3 months, and some older heads that I had ran it by. I talked to the members who had took the class, the journalism class, and asked if it was okay if I could use that name, Distant Voices, for this column that I'm trying to write. So got the green light from the class. So worked on it, and a few brothers was giving me insight and ideas on, and kept drafting it. And I worked in I think I worked in the library at the time, and I found a book called Press Time in the library, prison library. So I just studied the flow in newspapers, and I was reading the Final Call on a regular basis. So I just studied the flow of newspaper articles, and then just kind of mimic the flow, but had my own words in it. So after that, I sent that first article off. It was June 1998, and man, he said it was good. He said, you write better than some college students. So after that, that first article, it kind of gave me, it served two purposes, as sending a message out to the community, as well as help keep me focused, and therapeutic also, from a psychological perspective. So after that, I just started writing, like sometimes once a month, sometimes twice a month. I wrote like 90 articles up until my release in 2008.
Man, so, salute to you on that, man.
Yeah, appreciate it.
So it's like, cause a lot of dudes, a lot of dudes out here, we don't even be focusing on. We be focused on just the hustle and bustle, but I think a lot of people understand, like who haven't been to jail or prison, they don't understand that most of the time a freedom of mind don't come until you locked down physically.
Yeah. There was this one passage in this book that I read. I think came out of Ayanna Van Zandt. She had a book called Acts of Faith, Daily Meditations for People of Color. And I think I read that like almost every day for like 12 years straight, 12 of them 13. No, I say about 11. And in one of them, she get an analogy of still water and running water in a river. Like if you see a waterfall and you just say, I've only seen this waterfall like the Grand Canyon, well, not the Grand Canyon, Niagara Falls on video, on picture. But the idea that she expressed, that at the bottom of the waterfall, you know, it's a lot of rumbling rough. You can't really see from the shores or from the bank down inside the water. But in a still pond, when the sun is out, you can see your reflection. You know, and I kind of took that as being the still reflection, that stillness when you sat down, and you know you in them four walls, and you know you got to sell it. You can talk to him for so long, but he has his problems too. You know what I'm saying? He got a lot of time too, so you got to deal with yourself.
Yeah,
you know, and that's what that come in. Well, you know, brothers, you know, most of us come in here. Well, all of us got to come in here. You know, whenever we get to that point, you know, we got to sit down and face, you know, the mirror and sit down and think, you know, reflecting back, analyzing life, you know, like breaking down every point, every aspect of one's thought process, you know, why, you know, why did I make this decision? Or how was I influenced by these different events in my life? Whether it was family, whether it's the, you know, outside stimuli coming from the environment, you know, or whatever the case may be, you know, a brother sit back and think about, you know, every piece of his life 1,000 times over, you know, and, you know, that's at least, that was my experience, and, you know, how I came to, you know, draw purpose or mission, you know, out of for my life.
Okay, so let me ask you this. I hear you talk a lot about like Elijah Muhammad. You talk a lot about like the Nation of Islam. Are you a member of the nation?
No, I'm not a member of the nation, and
better question. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Do you practice the Muslim faith?
No, I don't practice the Muslim faith anymore. I did at one time, but I don't anymore. And my growth development, spiritual development, I kind of went through different transitions, you know, as I was learning and studying and learning and studying. And just say, for instance, if I came across this thought pattern that, not thought pattern, but I came across this piece by Dr. Malifi Asante. He wrote this book called Afrocentricity. And I grew up in the church, and I'm gonna relate this to the answer. I grew up in the church.
Okay.
Grew up in the church, and I started studying different religions and spiritual belief systems while there. You know, for me, I use it as a womb instead of a tomb. So, so some of the information and knowledge that I obtained or acquired while I was in there, the information that I was coming across, I had never, heard before, such as I even studied the literature of the Moors Science Temple of America. Their branch of Islam. I studied with the Rastafarians. I studied their teachings. And I read the Bible twice from cover to cover. I read the Quran because I fasted for some years during Ramadan, and you had to read like a 33rd of Quran, like every day of the month fast. So, but when I came across, I began like some years into my bid, I say about 7